Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at the sun's upcoming conjunction with Saturn, which is happening this week just after the new moon in Aquarius. Happy new moon, everybody. Here, let me pull it up on the chart and let's take a look at it. So here you can see that the sun, I actually have it on the flip side. Here we go. Here's the sun just moving into the, 3-degree range just after the new moon. The sun is in Aquarius, about 3 degrees off from Saturn. It's going to take a couple of days. By Friday, February 4th, you'll see the two conjoined. And by next Tuesday, the sun will be leaving the engagement range. So, talking about a week between now and February 8th, where the sun will be very close to Saturn. Now, Saturn is under the beams of the sun or combust, and it's but it's in its own sign, so it's sort of protected. We call that being in one's own, a planet being in its own chariot. But nonetheless, this is a story right now about, you could say, age and youth is one of the major themes to be looking at right now, considering that the sun and the new moon has a youthful signature. New moons are youthful, and it is square to Uranus, god of revolution and rebellion and progress. All things tend to be related with youthfulness. And then you have Saturn in the mix, which tends to be more about the wisdom of age and is a different kind of archetypal experience. It's not to say that we're not talking about old people here. We're talking about archetypes, right? So an old person, age-wise, could be very youthful in psychology. And vice versa. So a young person could be old in the way that they think or act or behave in the world. So we're not talking about literal age here, but we are talking about the archetypes of youthfulness versus the archetype of age or time, or maybe more like winter versus spring or something like that. So there's a lot of that in the air right now. A new moon that's square to Uranus, very youthful, very young, very progressive. But then there's this overarching presence of Saturn, which may be a little bit more like the wisdom of time and age and maturity and discipline and things like that. So today in particular, I want to take a look at the sun's conjunction with Saturn and what to expect from it. And again, remember, the sun is going to come through the conjunction with Saturn by Friday. So you can see the two coming together here on Friday, February 4th. They separate to within that 3-degree range by February 8th, a week from today. So you got about a week of the energies that we're going to be discussing today. All right, so typical Sun-Saturn themes to watch for. When you're thinking about the sun, you're thinking about a planet that is associated with action and ambition. What are we here to do? What are we passionate about? What is guiding our actions in life? Depends our intentions. What kind of intentions or desires do we have? What kind of fears or aversions do we have? So either what do we want, or what are we trying to keep away from? What are we motivated by? What is our intention behind an action as well? And this is not just, there's not just one plot line in our life. There are many plot lines in all the different areas of our life. So the sun, broadly speaking, is talking about what's motivating us and what we want or what we desire, what we're moving toward, how the plot line is developing. So a new moon, generally speaking, is planting a seed. That's the most worn out, image in the world for new moons, but it's true. It has behind it the sense of a new endeavor, the planting of a new vision or ideal that will carry us forward. And remember, it's like the new moons we're talking about motivations, moods, momentum, themes that will carry us for about a month. So it's not like in some moon cycles, depending on where they land and what other planetary configurations are present, will be bigger than others. For example, this moon cycle begins with a square to Uranus. That's has more of a blast and a kick behind it, because Uranus also likes to dismantle the old in favor of the new. Uranus likes to make a splash. Uranus likes to be defiant and rebellious. Uranus likes to buck the trend. So there's, it's quite a grand opening for this new moon cycle. And yet the early new moon cycle is also defined by immediate kind of contractive passageway that the sun takes through a conjunction with Saturn. Now, when the sun is conjoining Saturn, the sun moves faster than Saturn. So it's conjoining Saturn, which means that Saturn is dying and being reborn. It's changing its position in the sky. You can't see it right now. It's in its own sign, which means it's in its own chariot. So it's protected from the worst of combustion. But make no mistake, there's kind of a death and a rebirth happening at this time around Saturn stuff. And so it's as though for something new to be born in this cycle, some kind of progress to be made, there has to be the letting go of something old, or there has to be an encounter generationally between the young and the old. And we're not talking about literal age. It could be, but we're not. I mean, older people can have the spirit or psychology of youthfulness, and a youthful person can have the spirit of older archetypes, old age or wisdom. So this is not to be taken literally, but it is to say that there's a bit of a clash in the air at the beginning of this cycle between that kind of expansive, future-oriented, break the mold, Uranian new moon energy and the contractive, time-based, mature, disciplined old age of Saturn. So well, let's take a look at that today. Here are some of the things that let's just say, basically, the seed of the cycle has in mind progress, hope, breaking the mold, taking a risk, youthful endeavors and excitement. It has the desire for revolution and renaissance, reawaken something. And it's probably idealistic with the airy sign of Aquarius. So there's a fervor or a zeal about how something could be in the future. Now, immediately the sun is going to hit Saturn. So Saturn, sun, say yes, but is there enough discipline or responsibility? Is this the right thing to do from a sense of duty? Is this the mature or responsible thing to do? Is this authentic? I mean, Saturn, a lot of people would think, oh, what does Saturn care about authenticity? But time and age have a way of making you realize that, how many things that glitter and sparkle and fade very quickly. And Saturn its question about authenticity is, will it last? A test of authenticity for Saturn might be great, shiny, sparkly, new, exciting, but is it real? Will it last? And by real, we don't mean that, is it grounded? It shouldn't be imaginative. It should be conservative. Saturn can ask the very simple question, is it real? Meaning, is this something that you'll, it's like my girls really, wanted this dog that we got recently, and it was like, well, the Saturn question, not meaning to devour the children, right? But the Saturn question was sort of like, are you going to take care of the dog? Is this legit? It's a lot of responsibility. It's hard work. Are you ready for that? So those kinds of questions might be coming back to us in the next week, immediately in the face of, something youthful, exuberant, exciting, signified by the new moon square Uranus. There is a sense in which we define who we are and we define what we want in terms of what excites us, what motivates us, what we feel inspiration around. But also, a lot of those things come with the Saturnine check, which is, okay, great, you're inspired by this, but it's also going to create, you're going to have to say no to some things. Saturn, the great principle of negation, is not a negation just for the sake of being negative. It's often a way of saying, like, an artist makes a particular stylistic choice. They do so, in a sense, by limiting their options to choose other things in a color spectrum or the way that they present light versus darkness. So great, you have a big idea. Great, Saturn says, you have enthusiasm and you're going to break the mold and do something different and you're taking a risk. Great. And, in order to carry this through, in order to sustain or maintain what you're doing, you're going to have to set some boundaries and, probably say no to some things or people. Are you ready to do that? So those are questions that Saturn can ask us this week. On the other hand, one of the things that can happen is when we get a vision and we're excited about something, we can also become very narrow. Okay, so let me just give you an example. A lot of parenting metaphors for me, right? That's like my daily life. So let's just say, for example, um, I think this is a pretty common occurrence in my house. If you guys have kids, I bet it's probably something like this happens in your home too. You say something like, okay, tonight's movie night. Oh my God, really, it's super exciting. We're going to make some frozen pizzas or something. We're going to, and we're going to watch a movie. Okay. So, I'm thinking especially of my older daughter, Gigi. Let's say she gets super stoked about it, but then something changes, some unexpected shift happens in the schedule. And it's not, it's like, bummer, we're not going to be able to do movie night tonight. Let's just do it tomorrow night. We can do it tomorrow night. Not a big deal. In the grand scheme of things, it's a small adjustment. But my daughter's ego structure has, her sense of identity and where the action is heading has completely conformed to the anticipation, the excitement of the movie night. And so then naturally, she has a complete and utter meltdown and becomes very rigid, very angry, very stubborn, and, insistent and angry because, in her mind, we're breaking something we said we would do that now can't happen for one reason or another. I don't know why, but, just you can imagine such a situation, but that happens to all of us. It's not something that just happens to children. If we have a vision in our lives and we have a sense of where things are going, and then we become our enthusiasm can actually narrow our focus to the point where we become rigid. So it's a funny thing how inspiration opens up a new possibility, but then the inspiration and the excitement, if it becomes too zealous, also immediately narrows the focus. And that opening and narrowing is part of the creative process. It's part of how a creative transformation takes place. But the risk you run is that, look, not everything is going to go according to plan. And when things don't go according to plan, the downside is that have you become too narrowly identified with the object of your desire or the excitement or zeal that you feel for something, in which case the potential to become inflexible, rigid, intolerant, impatient, cruel, severe is there. And that's something that could happen this week with the sun conjoining Saturn right after the Uranian burst of the new moon. So just something to be aware of. You can also become, with the sun Saturn, the other idea is becoming the phrase that I liked from Ren Butler's Archetypal Universe, which you guys know is one of my favorite desk references, the phrase that he uses for identification or this tendency for the sun Saturn to mean that the sun gets identified with Saturn is he calls it slavish identification. I'm forgetting how he puts it, but slavish identification with your work or your project. Okay, so, and that's exactly right. The idea being that you get so conformed, so the image that you're trying to move toward as an ideal, you conform toward it to the point that it crystallizes around you and it becomes like calcified or petrified, a petrified ambition or something like that. So that's, it's not easy sometimes to receive feedback and to have to back away from something or reconsider something or wait a day to watch your movie night, to have your movie night, so watch for that kind of need to shift or to be adaptable or flexible this week as well. There's also a lot to be said for the sun Saturn being about overcoming. Sun Saturn can be pessimistic. Sun Saturn can challenge one's health or vitality. Sun Saturn can tell you, you're not good enough to do something, or that's not going to work, or can be kind of a cynic or pessimist. And so some of it's also the sun sort of overcoming the rigid, negating presence of Saturn. You can't do that. It's not going to work, or, like, for example, when I was a kid, when I would tell my grandmother, who's passed on now, that I wanted to be a writer, the very first thing she would say is, well, you'll never make any money. And, I remember telling her when I got a book deal with a Penguin imprint, right? It's about as, big as I could have ever expected. So I got a book deal and I said, Grandma, I got this book deal. And She looked at me and she said, well, how much did you get? And I told her the advance and everything. And she was like impressed, but not too impressed. And immediately she said, well, better get writing that next one. The checks won't write themselves unless you keep writing. That's how it works. Like she, just that was just her. That was just, and she was a, very Saturnine person in a sense. And I don't necessarily fault her for that. As she was growing older, in fact, one of my fondest memories about her is that I started writing her letters, and in the letters I wrote, I would use my creative writing in the way that I conveyed my messages and thoughts to her. And one of her first desires when she was a young woman is to become a journalist, but she was told by her parents that women in journalism were floozies. That's what they told her. So she restrained herself from pursuing her first desire, which was to be a journalist or a writer, a newspaper writer. And so I, in my letters, would just say, I know that you have a love for writing too. I hope you would, I think you should write something. And so in a lot of our letters before she passed, back and forth, she would write very poetically. Like never, ever did I hear her speak like that in my life, but she would write to me in a way that was very poetic. And toward the end of her life, she started offering encouragement and softening and things like that. So anyway, long story short is that it is very possible for the Sun Saturn to represent our inhibitions and also to project them outward. I know, for example, that it's very easy when I'm in a bad mood or feeling stifled or blocked creatively for me to project that onto my kids and become sort of the devourer of children, right? That's a Saturnine thing. It's very easy to do that to other people. You're feeling negative, you're feeling inhibited, you're feeling lack of support, or that you're feeling blocked or stifled. So then you become cynical. You project that same severity onto other people. That's not going to work. You shouldn't do it like that. You become very critical of what other people are trying to accomplish. So you want to be careful of those things when the sun is coming through a conjunction with Saturn. What I say no to defines my commitment. That's a big one. I already mentioned that. Also just the presence of wisdom that's been accomplished over time. So the wisdom of older people, or the wisdom of experience or mastery. It's a theme of mastery in the air. Moments of accomplishment as well that have come over a long period of time. Sometimes you're going to see issues like karma around fathers and authority figures, the death of older people, the death of the death of fathers, death of grandfathers, the death of CEOs, leaders, military or political leaders, famous people, but probably older masculine figures with the Sun and Saturn in particular. And that's, in the next week. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something, in the news. It's like, you can set your watch to it when you have big Sun conjunctions with Pluto, that someone famous will die, or same thing with Saturn. The fear of what other people think of us and conforming to images. Remember, Saturn was called the ruler of feigned appearances. So the desire to shape or mold our lives into an image that we think will be, no one could possibly judge us poorly. There's maybe a concern for how people will see things right now. So you got the new moon, very Uranian, experimental, progressive, youthful. The conjunction with Saturn, oh God, but what will people think? And be careful, because the question about authenticity comes up again. Is this authentic? Sometimes not only father karma in terms of death of fathers, but karma psychologically around fathers. Was my father present? Was my father absent? Was my father affirming or not? One of the roles that the archetypal father plays, this is not the literal father, but the archetypal father, you could say, is to be someone that affirms that we are each unique, select individuals. For example, the moon tends to be about how we are communal, how we are familial, how we are relational, how we are a part of ecology, the earth, how we relate to one another in tribe, family, nation, home. And the moon rules the people, the city, the voters, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the sun, although, in ancient times, the sun rules the king, but more than that, it rules the sense of individuality. So when the individual has to stand out from the collective in some way, when the individual has concerns about how they may stand out from the collective. Will I be accepted or not? Am I a black sheep or not? These are also Sun Saturn concerns. There's a way in which we all need to individuate and get out of, it's like if our lives are being lived all the time in social media, then we're probably not individuating. If our lives are being lived all the time, we don't have any space where there are any areas of our life where we're not growing and changing personally outside of what some group thinks. You know what I'm saying? You have to, in a sense, you need to get out of group space to have the individuation process grow. But you also are in this dance because you also need group space. You need your favorite podcasts, or you need your favorite authors. You need your favorite religious or spiritual community, or the people that you go to your yoga studio with, or whoever. You need those people, but you also need distance and space from them. Sun Saturn is a little bit like asking, who am I as I stand apart from others, as I stand alone, or as my views diverge in some ways from a collective in my life. So those kinds of tensions are also present in the Sun Saturn dynamic, because the sun has to do with what is select. The sun as a light in the sky stands alone, stands apart, and highlights the distinctions between things, as the masculine yang does metaphysically in general. There's a tree, there's a car, there's a rock. The sun illuminates distinction. The moonlight, everything swims together. There's the shadow and light play together more. There's interpenetration in relationship. The Sun Saturn is about standing apart, but then questions about, do I stand alone? Am I loved? Is it okay to be apart or on my own? Sometimes we have a pattern of standing apart that's based on resentment or hurt. Sometimes people want to stand apart or be different or other, not because they truly believe in something that's different or other, but because there's the need to be or look different than others as a way of trying to stand out. And any time that we are trying to base our identity in comparison and contrast with other people, then we're getting into polarizations. And the individuation process, a little bit of it should happen in the way that we polarize with other people. I am this, I am not that, etc. But individuation is also about finding that light within ourselves. It's not defined or maintained. It doesn't evolve based purely on all of the dynamical, polarizing tensions that we have with other people or groups. That going within, that space of just tapping into the spirit soul and developing and cultivating the interior of our lives. That process itself can be alienating because a lot of people just don't do it. And that's why we say, if you're only defining your life socially, it's hard to develop that inner space. So you need to have places in your life that cultivate and encourage that. Sun Saturn will ask, are you doing that? Are you not doing that? Does it hurt to do that? Is that part of you, that individual part of you? Is it being cultivated, or is it a scary place? At any rate, Sun Saturn can also be about the feeling of needing to defend ourselves. I'm misunderstood, right? Like that, because that kind of stuff can come up. All right, well, Ijing Hexagram for today is number 16, which is often translated as enthusiasm. I'm going to just read you a translation from Richard Wilhelm. This one goes like this. There is a rhythmic force. Well, first of all, enthusiasm. Thunder comes resounding out of the earth. Similar thunder roars up from the masses when the superior person strikes a chord in their hearts. Whip up enthusiasm, rally for your forces, and move boldly forward. So you can feel that very Sun Uranus energy, right? And a lot of it is also playing on the contrast between an individual and a collective. There is a rhythmic force, a world music that lives deep in the unconscious of each of us. It's a primitive drumbeat, a shaking rattle, a tribal chant that invokes the primal self to rise up and join the dance. This is the enthusiasm that is generated now, not rhetorical persuasion, not a play on the emotions, but a charismatic, irresistible call of the wild. Confucius said that the person who could comprehend this could rule the world as though it were spinning in his hand. This is a time for instinct, not intellect, the thunder from beneath. So to me, the I Ching says, look, there's a primal call that's rising up, and when it takes over, the tendency may be to try to rationally control that force because it's scary. But there's also a time in life to let ourselves be guided by that force and to let its wisdom take us where we are meant to go, and to trust that there's a sense in this hexagram of trusting that you won't be alienated. You may actually inspire other people, or that if you're inspired to follow a calling, whether that's a person or a drumbeat, that following something out of a sense of devotion, and that there's a risk involved, that you shouldn't be overly mentally calculated about it, too conservative and cautious. Those are some of the pieces of advice that this hexagram gives us. I want to read you something from James Hillman called From the Force of Character and the Lasting Life. This is a book about aging. There's some passages that he mentions also about the wisdom of old age and so forth. I'm just going to read you a few different passages, also to stand up for the fact that Saturn is not just like the conservative old stuff that wants to block the new. There's also something about age and wisdom, I think, this week that can go in our favor, that can help us to make wise choices. Here's what he says. He says, oldness is an adventure. Now remember, he's not talking about literal age. He's talking about archetypal age. Oldness is an adventure. Stepping from the bathtub, hurrying to the phone, or just going down the stairs presents as much risk as traveling camelback in the Gobi. Once we were down the stairs and out the door, way ahead of our feet. Now, who knows when the trick knee will give out or the foot miss the tread. Once we learned from the fox and the hawk. Now the walrus, the tortoise, and the moose in a dark bog are our mentors. The adventure is that of slowness. He says, the appreciation of any phenomenon calls for a phenomenological method. To know your mother, study her. Don't compare her with your father or her sister or the mother of someone else. Our approach tries to penetrate the phenomenon itself. We walk around it from many sides, circumambulate, expand it by turning up its volume, amplify, distinguish among its everyday appearances, differentiate. We want more of its character to shine forth, epiphanies, revelations. To inquire into oldness by thinking also about youth and freshness and the future diverts the inquiry into a study of opposites, rather than bringing us closer to the nature of oldness, that quality we feel in old things and places, meeting old friends, going to old movies, watching a pair of old hands at work. The world nourishes when we feel its oldness. The human soul cannot draw very much from the new world of discoveries or from futurism's brave new world, which makes nothing that lasts and whose swiftly obsolescent generations are far shorter than those humans enjoy. Not those worlds, but this old, old world. The very word world was once spelled wereld, this nourishing place so full of eld. It is as if old were hidden inside world, much as the Gnostic Sophia and the Kabbalist Shekinah, I think that's how you pronounce it, were the soul concealed within the created world. Sophia is a figure of ageless wisdom, the intelligence of soul abiding in all things. As the soul of the world is an old soul, we cannot understand soul without a sense of old, or old without a sense of soul. What is it but the characters of old words, things, and places that brings comfort to our daily lives? They show more and more character. That whiskey tumbler has character partly because it is brimming with connections flowing in from a multitude of memories. Like Proust's cookie, the glass is rich with other occasions, a talisman of recall, the objective correlative of emotions and thoughts. It is the, quote, same old tumbler, old because it is the same one and same because it is the old one. I have held it in my hand and it has hand-held me, settling me down, getting me through, and I take good care of it. Reciprocity. I find myself with it and come back to myself through it. It is what I live with and most closely, granting me the feeling in its presence of something truly mine. It is an external soul, like those ensouled objects of indigenous people, without which they become lost, sick, or crazy. In any other glass, the whiskey would merely be a drink. Even when chipped, blunted, and threadbare from overuse, old things have acquired character from familiarity, from utility, and sometimes from the beauty of luster, patina, or design, or simply from being old, the being of oldness. Without this sense of old as a state of being beyond beauty and utility, we cannot come easily into older years. Instead of the lasting that oldness signifies, the richness of accumulations coupled with the shedding of inessentials, we moderns take old only as the result of destructive time, as a last stage linked to death rather than to lastingness. Old brings out character, gives character, and often substitutes for character in our common feelings. That old house means a house with a strong character, and my old dog refers to her character traits that are evident and familiar. I do not call the house old simply because it was built in 1851 or the dog because of her 16 years. Numbers are impartial, applicable without feeling, and therefore are so useful for the uninvolved stance where the adjective old bears emotions. And so I say old for things deeply loved and just as deeply reviled. The best I can say of someone and the worst is that he is old. My granddaughter picks up a plate and I say, take care. That belonged to my grandmother, your great-great-grandmother. I'm telling her that the plate is dear, rare, valuable, vulnerable. I am asking her to accommodate her young hands to its oldness. She has to adjust to its pace, handle it gently, walk it slowly across the room, feel its fragility. I am telling her that it has lasted and that it is valuable because it has lasted, proving its sturdy reliability and also its frailty. History has layered the plate with years of time, but it is not time alone that gives the feeling. It is the oldness as character, character as layering, a complexity that makes the plate unique and calls from us respect. Aging opens the door to old, and old age opens it yet wider. That could be its point. Can we know the world's oldness or enter into the character of anything until we are ourselves old? That the old are burdened with wisdom means they know the ways of the world because they are old as it is. They share the same state of being, wearing thin and wearing out, of course, but old also holds time affectionately. It loves years, decades, century. Old holds off change, bringing all old things nearer to permanence. Time is not only destructive, it toughens as well as weakens. Time lasts. It keeps on going and going and going, and therefore is no enemy of age or of old. But time is indeed destructive to youth, which it eats away and finally stops dead. So when we hear of the corruption caused by time, we are listening to youth speaking, not age. I'll end there. It's a beautiful passage. The whole book is beautiful, all about age, aging, time, timelessness, youth and old age. Beautiful, beautiful book. But what we're doing, in a sense, when I design a talk like this, is trying to draw out tensions. The archetypal tensions between the sun and Saturn, the individual and the collective, youth and old age. How does Saturn become something more than just a conservative backlash in the face of enthusiasm this week? How does it become the voice of the beautiful voice of time and age and wisdom, maturity and experience? That's a possibility this week as well. How do we listen to a call, an enthusiastic call, like a primordial drumbeat rising up, a new moon, square Uranus, without becoming overly rational and controlled? And watch out for that young whippersnapper energy, watch out for that enthusiasm and devour the children, So these are the tensions present this week with the new moon cycle. And the point is, every time I design these talks, it's to keep moving, to keep turning. This is exactly what Hillman mentions, actually, in particular. And I'm going to lose the page. I lost the page already. But when he says that it's a phenomenological approach and we keep turning the jewels of the archetypes so that we can see them from many angles, differentiate them, amplify them. When we do that, then as we walk into our week, prepared for the new moon, or having to experience the new moon, preparing for the sun and Saturn, we can do so from a more conscious place. Like more conscious, we don't mean better. We mean more attentive. Relationally, to be conscious is what I'm interested in. When I'm relationally conscious, I'm present for my kids. When I'm relationally conscious, I care about what my wife is saying and feeling and thinking, and I pick up on subtler nuances in her voice and in her body language. When I care, when I'm present, when I'm conscious, I care what my clients are saying. I care how I make my talks in the morning. Most of us need practices every day to make sure that we remain conscious. But for a lot of us, what astrology does is it helps us to remain conscious by telling us, hey, did you know there's actually psychic weather happening all around you? And here's what it's like. And then let's turn it and differentiate it. Because by doing that, you become more awake. You listen, you take these things into your ears, these kinds of talks, whether it's me or the next astrologer, if it's good talk, hopefully, and you simply become more aware of what's happening psychically. You become aware. We think that everything that's going on in our heads is all of our own creation. Well, it's my thoughts, my head, my feelings. Well, most of that's not how the ancients saw things. They're like, yeah, there's some of that's you, but a lot of it is also the gods and these archetypal fields that are flowing through us all of the time. Becoming aware of them means that you become relationally attentive in terms of an existential posture. You take up a posture of attentiveness to experience itself. That's why we're doing this. And we have to repeat that that's why we're doing this all the time, because otherwise we don't realize this is a meditation. This is a spiritual practice. This is what I'm doing. So we have to be intentional about why we do this too. And I thought a lot about that as I missed making content last week. I just thought it's not the same also to do it alone. It's great to share it with other people. And on that note, if you have a story to share this week, Sun, Saturn, use the hashtag grab, the grahas, the planets called the grabbers. They seize us. They play in our lives. How are they showing up in your life? Use the hashtag grab, put Sun square, conjoined Saturn, or Uranus, new moon in Aquarius square Uranus, or whatever your story is. Tell us your story. And we'll be sharing some of the stories probably in the next week or so. If you don't want to share it publicly in the chat comment section of the YouTube video, you can email us, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.